I'd like to address an issue that has come up in the comments to a lot of my videos. Sometimes people make fun of me in certain ways, most usually because of the way I talk. I admit I have a bit of a lisp. I got some speech therapy as a child to help me say my S's, and occasionally I lapse into a lisp. That doesn't bother me as much. People have also pointed out to make a kind of a clicking sound when I speak. Honestly, I never noticed that until I started doing videos, and I'm working on that. It's an old habit, you know, probably doing this habit for 38 years, or not quite as long, but you get the idea. It might be tough to break that, but that doesn't bother me that much. What bothers me, and I'm going to emphasize right here, what bothers me is that people seem to be upset, at least some people are upset, that I seem to wave my hands around a lot when I talk. Hey, guilty as charged, okay? I grew up in an Italian neighborhood, okay? So, as might say in the old neighborhood, you got a problem with that? Huh? Waving hands in an Italian neighborhood when you speak is a way of life. I'm not Italian, but when I grew up as a young child, pretty much all my friends were Italian. And, you know, in a way, I'm kind of culturally Italian in the way I grew up. And yes, I wave my hands around a lot. Not this much, but I'm just doing it for emphasis. But yeah, I tend to wave my hands. I tend to talk with my hands, okay? Nothing wrong with that, you know. And look, a lot of benefits to growing up in an Italian neighborhood. I mean, I know good pizza from crappy pizza. I know all the best Italian food, you know, kind of a connoisseur when it comes to Italian food. It's an important thing to know in life. It's an important thing to be able to find a good Italian restaurant at some point in your life. So, I got that going for me, which is nice. And I will say that growing up in a neighborhood was quite interesting. How can I say this? I don't want to read too much into this. And maybe I do. All I need to tell you about my neighborhood is that our city councilman was known as Big Al. That's the kind of Italian neighborhood I grew up in. There was a prominent guy called Big Al. And if you're thinking about, you know, mafia connections, all that kind of stuff, you're not too far off, because I grew up in Ozone Park, New York, which was the headquarters of John Gotti. If you don't know John Gotti, he was Dapper Don, the Teflon Don, like the major mafia figure of the last 20 years of the 20th century. Yeah, so he set up shop in my neighborhood. You know, that's where he did his business, so to speak. So, you know, growing up in an Italian neighborhood of that sort was interesting at times. As I said, there was Big Al. I don't know if the guy had mafia connections or anything like that. I mean, yes, he was called Big Al, but the man did weigh 500 pounds, so it was a natural name. You weren't going to call the guy Little Al unless you were trying to be ironic. He's a big dude. But what I did notice was that every time he ran for re-election, all the local storefronts, all of them had up the big placards for Big Al. None of them had it for the other candidate, at least not for more than one day. Occasionally I would see a placard up for another candidate. Next day, gone. I'd find them on the floor. I'd find them ripped up. Whether you supported Big Al or not, if you ran a local business in the neighborhood, you had to sign up for Big Al when he ran for re-election. There was no doubt about that. Now, I don't want to necessarily say that this is the mafia pressuring people. I don't want to say that, you know, these places were paying protection money, but you know, I have my suspicions about the whole protection money thing, especially when we started having explosions at the local Blockbuster Video. This was either in the late 80s or early 90s, about the time that Blockbuster came on the scene, and thankfully I was never in there when it happened, but I heard of at least 2 occasions where they said there was an explosion at Blockbuster Video. I mean, it couldn't have been an explosion that blew the whole place up. I heard the word bomb used, but it couldn't have been a huge bomb. Maybe it was a fire bomb, like they're trying to get the place burnt down. So I was told 2 bombs went off there in 2 separate occasions. I don't know if it was a bomb or a fire bomb, but it didn't blow the whole place up, but apparently did damage. And it happened at least 2 times, and the reason, we don't know the reason, but most people believe the reason was that before Blockbuster came on the scene, there were a lot of locally owned video places, probably run by Italian families who were probably, had to pay protection money. And when Blockbuster came on the scene and tried to steal business, they probably went up to Mr. Gotti and said, well, hey, how about some protection here? Or something like that happened, And next thing you know, bombs are going off in the local Blockbuster. And eventually it stopped. I would imagine that Blockbuster and the local video places and, the mob interest in town all got together and reached a nice financial agreement that allowed Blockbuster to stay in town. But, yeah, I grew up in a neighborhood where Blockbusters would occasionally explode. All right. Interesting. Not great, but interesting. And that's not the worst of it. I went to a local barber. I went to the guy for many years, probably from the age of, 13 until I left for college. As a matter of fact, even when I came home from college, I would still get my hair cut. So I probably went to the guy for roughly 10 years. And it must have been 17 or 18. I forget exactly how old I was when it happened, but this barber had a brother in the neighborhood who was also a barber. I didn't go to this guy, but my barber's brother, who was a brother, got taken out in a mob hit in his barber shop. He was, doing his business, cutting hair or whatever, and guys drove by and shot him through the window of his barber shop. Yeah, for some reason, maybe because I'm used to growing up in the neighborhood, obviously it's a horrible thing, but you would think if it had any sense, I would say, maybe I shouldn't go to, this barber's brother, because maybe whatever happened to his brother, this guy was involved in, and maybe sitting in his barber chair in his shop, which is right, which has, this nice window facing the street where a car could drive by with people with guns. Maybe I shouldn't be sitting there. Maybe I shouldn't be going there every 2 months or so. For some reason, I never stopped going to the guy. He wasn't that great cutting your hair, but I don't know, I was just lazy. I'm used to going to the guy, so you took it for granted. I went to the guy, got my hair cut, and not until now that I think, could have got my hair cut someplace else. I could have gone outside the neighborhood. I didn't need to go to a place whose brother, who's a barber, got shot in his barber shop, probably by the mob. Do I really want to hang out there? But yeah, that's where I got my hair cut. So that was the kind of neighborhood I grew up in. As I said, interesting. But, okay. What I want to say now is that I no way condone organized crime, and I hope anyone who's involved in organized crime gets put into prison. It's a terrible thing. Obviously, people get shot, people get stole from, people get intimidated. It sucks. Stuff like The Sopranos romanticizes it, and The Godfather and all that kind of stuff, but, a lot of bad things happen because of organized crime, so you would hope it would go away. That being said, if you're not Italian, and if you don't run a local business, and if you don't work in the area, a mafia town isn't the worst place in the world to live. My dad we were not Italian. My dad did not own a local business, did not work anywhere near the area. He went to Manhattan to work. So all we did was we lived there. We lived there, we went to the shops, we went to the barber shops and all that kind of stuff. But, the mafia never entered our lives. No one came to us and asked us for protection money. We didn't have a business. No one pressured us to be involved in the mafia or anything. We weren't Italian. There was, the mafia basically ignored us. It's just like we weren't there. So we just went along our lives. And let me tell you, in a town that has a lot of organized crime, I think it's safe to say that there's really not a lot of, how you might call it, unorganized crime. These shops that are paying protection money, there aren't burglaries, places aren't getting broken into, places aren't getting held up because, gosh darn it, I think the mob feels, anyone's going to commit crime in this town, it's us. I think that's the attitude of the mob in these mob neighborhoods. If anyone's going to commit a crime, it's them. And if you're unlucky enough to be the type they commit crime against, then that sucks. If you own a local business and they're extorting you and making you pay protection money, or if they're hijacking your shipments of goods and, doing all that stuff, it sucks for you. But, I'm just saying that if you're not involved in that, if you don't have a business there, it could be nice. Damn, I got to cut off the last minute because I hit the 10-minute limit. Believe me, folks, you're not missing much. See you next time.